Donald Trump has announced that the United States intends to run Venezuela after it carried out a large-scale attack and claimed to have captured its president, Nicolás Maduro, flying him out of the country with his wife. Explosions were heard in the capital, Caracas, this morning, as well as in other Venezuelan cities.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
Adversaries remain on notice.
It involved more than 150 aircraft launching across the Western Hemisphere.
The President of the United States is not a game player, but don't play games.
According to international law, what happened to Nicolás Maduro can be described as an abduction. According to the U.S. Department of Justice framing, it is presented as an arrest. And according to the long history of Latin America, it fits a familiar tradition of powerful states treating the region as a zone where force can be explained after the fact. This is the story of how all three can feel true at once, and what it means for every country that has something a more powerful nation wants. Because the night Maduro was taken isn't just a news event. It's a revelation, a live demonstration that in global politics, the architecture of power regularly overrides the architecture of law. What's being described in public reporting is a textbook extraction narrative, rapid action, overwhelming capacity, and a swift transfer into U.S. custody. The exact operational details vary depending on who is telling the story, but the political logic is consistent. Washington frames it as enforcement of serious criminal indictments, while Caracas frames it as a violation of sovereignty. And international law, in its most basic form, says the use of force across borders is only lawful in narrow conditions, typically self-defense or explicit international authorization. If neither condition applies, the action enters contested territory immediately. Yet the operation, whatever its precise mechanics, happened anyway. And that's the point. Not because the law was universally agreed upon, but because capability existed. This is where the real battle begins, not only on the ground, but in language. Even the words become a battlefield. U.S. officials prefer terms like apprehension, custody, law enforcement action. Venezuelan officials and supporters use words like kidnapping, abduction, invasion. Much of the media settles on captured, a term that sounds neutral, but quietly carries a bias. It normalizes the act by borrowing the moral authority of policing. Words shape perception, and perception shapes history long before any court rules. This is how force gets laundered into legitimacy, through vocabulary that makes extraordinary actions sound procedural. But this was never only about law or language. It's also about material power, about resources, leverage, and who gets to define rights. Days before, public rhetoric from U.S. political leadership circulated around a blunt claim that Venezuela took our oil rights, that American companies were pushed out, and that the United States wants it back. Whether people say the quiet part softly or loudly, the pattern is recognizable. Venezuela holds extraordinary energy reserves. For decades, foreign dominance over extraction shaped the relationship. Then came nationalization, sanctions, and a long siege of financial and commercial pressure. When a leader is removed, and the world's largest reserves suddenly become renegotiable in the imagination of power, it's rarely coincidence. It's a recurring structure. To understand that structure, you don't need a security clearance. You need a history book. Iran, in 1953, a democratically elected government nationalizes oil, and foreign powers engineer regime change. Iraq, in 2003, an invasion justified in the language of security ends with the reshaping of the state and its resource sector. Libya, in 2011, An intervention framed as protection slides into regime change and a scramble over contracts and influence. In each case, there's a blend of legal arguments, security narratives, and economic interests. In each case, the language of justice, stability, or protection masks the logic of control. That's why the Maduro episode, whether you accept every detail or not, does not read as an exception. It reads as the latest chapter in a very old playbook. And in this hemisphere, that playbook has a name: the Monroe Doctrine. Born in 1823 as a warning to European empires, it evolved in practice into a regional permission structure, an instinct that the Americas are a managed space, where outside alignment is treated as provocation and intervention is framed as order. When a Latin American government aligns with rival powers, Russia, China, Iran, the doctrine's logic reactivates, not always as official policy, but as political reflex. Operations, asset seizures, and rhetoric about taking back what is ours begin to look less like isolated events and more like the doctrine wearing modern camouflage. That's the Global South lesson here, and it's not subtle. From Caracas to Karachi, from La Paz to Lahore, the unedited message is this: sovereignty is often treated as conditional. It lasts only as long as your resources align, your policies comply, and your alliances remain convenient to the dominant power. If you have oil, lithium, rare earths, strategic geography, or strategic refusal, your sovereignty is not defended by law alone. It is negotiated by power. And when that negotiation breaks down, the enforcement doesn't always arrive as formal war. It can arrive as sanctions, seizures, and the language of law enforcement, crossing borders. So what do we take from this? The law did not simply fail, it was overridden by capability and narrative. The media does not need to lie to shape reality, it only needs to frame. And the operation doesn't have to be rogue to be illegitimate in the eyes of those subjected to it. It can be systemic, normalized, and repeatable. This is how empires enforce order, not always by breaking rules loudly, but by writing rules in real time, then using vocabulary to make the rewriting feel natural. The lesson is not that power always wins. The lesson is that knowing the script is the first step to rewriting it. For Venezuela, the next chapter is uncertainty. For the Global South, the assignment is clear: build leverage, diversify alliances, deepen self-reliance, and stop storing your future inside systems you don't control. Because in this world, the strongest weapon isn't only the drone or the raid. It's the ability to decide what is legal, what is normal, and what words get used when force crosses a border. At Liberation Lens, we don't just watch history. We translate the script. If this changed how you hear headlines, share it. Debate it. Break the narrative. This is Liberation Lens. And perspective has never mattered more.